some outside help. In the case of Turkey, if you go back to 2000, 2001, we secured help from the IMF, but also we did very painful adjustments. So pain at that time, was sold to people saying pain today, growth tomorrow, rewards tomorrow. But in the case of Europe, it looks like pain today and pain tomorrow, literally, because there is deleveraging by private sector. Banking sector is weak because of other reasons that I explained. And of course, governments are pushing for austerity. So that means lower economic activity. External backdrop is not as strong as it used to be. So you've got a combination of weak domestic demand on the back of deleveraging by private sector, fiscal austerity by governments, and of course weaker banking sector, which means higher jobless rates, falling economic activity, and actually you're not gaining anything. Fiscal austerity is not fixing problem. Europe needs growth, but for growth to start, you need a significant boost, an external boost. That's why the argument for a bank bailout by a European fund, for government, I know there is moral hazard and all kind of issues, but essentially there is clear need for support from outside, whether that is Germany, whether it's a combination of other funds. Clearly, something has to be done.
I saw several nods there as you were speaking, Minister Şimşek. John Evans.
I think there's a difference between an individual economy which is faced by a fiscal crisis, where you can take measures which regain confidence, bring down interest rates, and get the economy growing again, particularly if you've got a flexible currency. I think you can't do that at a continental level, which is such a large component of global GDP.
So one size doesn't fit all?
Globally, you have to get some growth back in the system, and you have to get demand rising again as well. The IMF just came out with a study which suggested that looking at the last 30 years, set over 100 examples of fiscal austerity, they do in the short term actually reduce growth. The problem is when that's happening in a continent at the same time, nobody is growing. And I think that's a dilemma at the moment. I also say I think that it's wrong to see public debt as being the cause of the crisis. With one or two countries, that was certainly the case in Europe. But generally, public debt in Spain was lower than that of Germany. It was sometimes debts in the private sector, the Irish banking system, this real estate in Spain. And what we've seen is the growth in debt has been the result of the crisis, not the cause of it. Now, it's difficult to untangle it, but somehow we have to re-inject growth into the system.
I don't want to set up any rivalries here, but you, Sir Michael Rick, if you were to choose between investing in the Eurozone and investing in the Turkish economy, for instance, where would you invest that money?
Short answer. In the short term, it's clearly Turkey. But I did want to reflect on a couple of the comments that were made about the banking sector. I think this is critically important. It's dangerous to oversimplify things. On the other hand, unless you see things clearly, you can't understand. The reality is that most Western economies had overborrowed during the boom, both privately and publicly, to varying degrees. The reality is when the music stopped because of the banking crisis and the complete breakdown in confidence in the financial system, actually we kind of ran out of the ability to borrow money to solve the problem, to buy our way out of problem. Therefore, I think there was absolutely no choice but for this austerity program to come in. I think there's a real issue now around how you operate with the banks, because there is a huge amount of deleveraging going on. And because the regulators kind of failed to make sure the banks had the right level of capital and liquidity prior to the crisis, we risk now a huge overreaction and a rapid deleveraging of the banking sector, which is compounding the problem of growth. So it's not just the banks that have had a problem. They're being actually forced by the regulators to reduce their size dramatically. And the real problem here, and we really have to understand this, is big companies like BT could go to the commercial paper markets and get very cheap finance directly, from the market. SMEs, where the employment's going to come from, can only get it from the banks. And certainly the experience in the UK is very clear. The SMEs who have the assets actually at the moment don't have the confidence, partially because of the Eurozone crisis, to invest. Those who have intellectual property but no assets aren't able to borrow and aren't able to expand. So we're being caught in a real vice-like difficulty. And I think there's a huge need here for really strong leadership at the Eurozone level. It isn't the Eurozone who caused the problem, to unlock some of this, to give business the confidence to move forward and invest where they have cash, and to sort of create an environment where it's easier for SMEs tomorrow. And at the moment, the uncertainties around will Greece leave, what's the position of the banks who have huge exposures to Greece? Will that roll on to Spain? What are the position of unfunded, banks who look all right today? Will they be all right if Spain gets into really serious issues? Is causing an enormous confidence in crisis, crisis in confidence. And I think we really, really need to understand that too in order to work through this. It isn't just about finding specific measures to create employment. I mean, creating employment through public sector, which the UK did to some degree, you see the problem. You've created false jobs.
Well, we're of course in Ireland downsizing enormously the public sector. We're going to cut the public sector pay bill by a factor of 20% between 2009 and 2015. The issue in relation to bad political decisions and bad banking decisions in terms of people lending money, there was also obviously bad decisions on those who lent the money, and those who accounted for them, of course, as well. So there's a shared moral hazard if we're looking at the spectrum of moral hazard, and we need to address it on that basis. But Sir Michael is absolutely right in relation to the issue of access to money in an economy such as the one I am living in is extremely important. And while lots of SMEs actually do want to invest now, and the banking system is telling us that there is money available, when you drill down, it's very hard. The conditionality of accessing that money is such that in reality for many SMEs it's not possible. And we need to have a strategy that allows businesses to have access in the medium term to survive and in the medium term to thrive.
Professor Saleh Martin.
Yes, I think we should not forget that every single economic theory in the history of the world says that if you increase taxes in the middle of a recession, and I'm talking about Keynesians, I'm talking about classics, I'm talking about lunatics, everybody agrees that if you increase taxes in the middle of a recession, the recession worsens. If you reduce spending in the middle of a recession, the recession worsens, okay? So nobody believes that magically the opposite will happen. Now, it might be very necessary to start austerity programs in the middle of recession, but everybody remember that this will, at least in the short run, worsen the problem. Now, all these textbooks at the same time also tell you that there are other kinds of policies that you can engage in when the fiscal policy is not available. We're talking about monetary policy, we're talking about exchange rate policy, and we're talking about supply side policies. That's why I was saying earlier that we shouldn't just engage in the debate more or less austerity. Maybe austerity is necessary, but this is not excuse for not doing anything else. Why aren't we playing with monetary policy? Why aren't we playing with exchange rate policy? Why are we taking so long to engage in supply or competitiveness policies? And point number two, I want to take issue on the problem of the fiscal problem of Spain. Spain had a fiscal problem even though it was not in the data. Spain had a real estate bubble, and therefore the tax revenue was transitorily high. And when the tax revenue was very, very high for a short period of time, the government increased spending permanently. Then, of course, the bubble bursts, tax revenue goes down, you stay with a huge spending, and the deficit arrives. And also, Spain had a real big private debt bank problem. Government made a big mistake of, the same mistake as Ireland, of saying we will save all the banks. When you say that, immediately all the debt of all the banks becomes public debt. And therefore, the real government debt is really, really big because it's coming. In the next few weeks, we will see how big the government debt actually was.
All right, we're going to take a short break now. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Do stand by for us because we'll come back straight to this debate. As I said, we're going to take a short break now, and we'll be back right after the news. Do stay with us here on France 24. By the magic of television, we shall now resume this debate in a moment. I shall just walk up to this mark right here on the floor.
Thank you. lubricated enough.
Just waiting for the go-ahead in my ear. TV presenter does nothing except for, unless someone speaks into his ear. Welcome back. You're watching France 24, and we're bringing you a special debate today brought to you in cooperation with the World Economic Forum. We are discussing austerity and we're discussing growth. In just a moment, we'll pick up our discussion with our distinguished panel once again. But first, though, we're going to bring you a special message from a man who's centrally placed in Eurozone politics today. Unfortunately, he could not be here in person, but he recorded this message from Rome.